have an incredible guest, Mr. Trevor Constable. He talks about the UFO phenomenon and his own weather. And he was recently just on George Norrie, coast to coast. So without any further ado, let's give him a warm round of applause for Mr. Trevor Constable.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Now we're going to fool with this thing. Let's see. How about that? Can you all hear me? Good. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess that takes in most of you. Let's get going here on this evening. I wanted to start out by, first of all, establishing the reality of the UFOs with government film. I didn't want to give you anything that was not officially sanctioned. And this is a piece of film that you can buy from your local video store. It's produced by Terra Entertainment in Hollywood, and you can buy it and look at it for 2 hours and see everything that's on it. The most important thing that's on this piece of film is what you're going to see now. It's been excerpted from this film, and you can enjoy it along with everybody else. You want to fire it now? Okay. This is a film that was made in 1996, and it's
1996, on Space Shuttle mission number STS-75,
tether incident.
NASA launched a possible breakthrough energy technology experiment. They launched a 12-mile-long electrical conductor cable called an electrodynamic tether, designed to collect high-energy electrons in the Earth's ionosphere and magnetic fields. The motion of the conductor tether across the Earth's magnetic fields induces a voltage along the 12-mile length of the tether. Utilizing estimates in the charge densities of the Earth's magnetic fields and the ionosphere, the voltage produced is expected to be up to several hundred volts per kilometer. If successful, the experiment could produce a lot of electrical power. If additional power is driven along the tether in the opposite direction to that which it normally wants to flow, the tether, in theory, could push, creating propulsion against the Earth's gravity to raise the shuttle's orbit. The advantage to this revolutionary technology in propulsion is that it does not require any rocket fuel. If successful, electrodynamic tethers could prove a way to greatly reduce the cost of in-space propulsion. For example, the International Space Station could keep itself in orbit, saving nearly $2 billion in orbital reboost rocket fuel for every 10 years of the station's operations. But on February 25th, after the 12-mile tether began producing electricity, an unexpected overload of electrical energy fluctuating between 2 and 10 times that predicted, due to inaccurate estimates in the electrical charge of the Earth's magnetic fields, ionosphere, and possibly space radiation, fried the tether conductor cable and it broke, severing it from the space shuttle.
So the tether has broken at the boom. The tether has broken and is going away from us. Get it on the TV, Claude. Please get it on the TV. The tether has broken.
Copy. Columbia and the satellite now 77 nautical miles apart. Again, that call reporting that the crew can see the tether and see the satellite. It's beautiful.
Look at all that stuff around there. You've probably got 30 UFOs. 300 miles above the Earth. The tether is 12 miles long.
Again, just moving into sunrise. 81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
This is recorded on ultraviolet tape, not visible tape.
Guys getting the image?
Franklin, we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Well, the long line is a tether, and there's a little bit of debris that kind of flies with us, and it's illuminated by the sun at such low angles. So there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly, but Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Again, that description by the crew, this is the tether in the satellite with approximately 12 miles of tether still attached to it. Columbia and the satellite are now just passing over the west coast of northern Africa. The two spacecraft are now 90 nautical miles apart. Controllers for the satellite did have communications with it during the close pass between Columbia and the satellite.
Those pulsating things were photographed by us on the desert.
Columbia, Houston, that's a much better view, a lot more contrast visible. And how wide does that tether appear to be? It seems to resemble a much wider strand than we'd expect. Can you describe which way the satellite is visible on that strand?
Those are critters, those things pulsating across the screen. They're living organisms. .300 miles above the Earth.
Satellite now 100 nautical miles.
Charlie, completely unzoomed, and you see the full extent of the tether. I tried to adjust the focus, but I can't get better than that.
Okay, Claude. Thank you.
I'm going to zoom in now.
In the summer of 1999, I met with Martin Stubbs, the program manager of the cable TV station, who had recorded over 400 hours of NASA's live broadcast. He gave me some videotape on a new incident that happened in February of 1996 on Space Shuttle mission STS-75. What was called the tether incident. So what you just saw on the videotape showed a 12-mile-long satellite, a satellite attached to a 12-mile-long tether, which is like a conductor cable. It's a very, very thin, 1/10 of a centimeter in thickness cable that was used to conduct electricity in the Earth's ionosphere. As we saw earlier, space is supercharged with high-energy particles, and NASA was trying to take advantage of these particles to see if they could build up a charge on the tether and actually see a gain or produce some electricity. They charged the tether with some electricity, but then an overload of highly charged particles flooded the tether and produced so much electricity it snapped. On February 25th at about 7:30 p.m., the tether broke away from the shuttle Columbia and drifted about 77 miles away. So the scene that you just saw actually starts at about 77 miles away. The camera pans down. We see a long line, which is 12 miles long of tether, a small satellite attached to the end, and then a swarm of little objects, little balls of light, just moving in from all different directions and different velocities and different speeds. Then the cameras actually zoom in, and we actually get to take a close look at what we're seeing here. It's astounding. We see up here in the right-hand corner, we see a very large disk clearly going behind the tether. And we can actually see little black dots racing around to suggest some sort of a magnetic field effect. And coming through the middle, we see another very large disk moving clearly behind the tether. The light from the tether shines in front of the background object, which is the UFO. If we use this piece of wood as an example, we can see what a disk looks like when it's passing behind a foreground object. It's really very quite simple. So if the disk was passing in front of the tether, it would look something like this, and it doesn't look like that. When we look in the middle and we see this large disk passing through the middle, we can see again it's passing behind the tether. If this was the tether and this was the UFO, we could clearly see it's going behind. And if it was going in front, it would look something like this. It doesn't look like that. So because we know the shuttle is at least 77 miles away and drifting further away from the object, from the tether, and we know the objects are going behind the tether, we can therefore use the 12-mile length of the tether as a relative measuring rod for actually making measurements of the minimum diameters of some of these disks. And according to my calculations, against the 12-mile length of the tether, this disk passing through the top section here measures a minimum of 2 to 3 miles in diameter. That's assuming it's right up next to the back of the tether. If it's actually farther behind the tether than I think, then the disk could be much, much larger. The further it gets behind it relative to the distance of the tether, the larger it actually is in reality and compared to measuring it against the tether. Again here, this disk going through the middle here, I estimate it to be between 2 and 3 miles in diameter. If a UFO were flying over the city of Los Angeles in the downtown core or New York, and it was 2 to 3 miles wide in diameter, it would black out the entire sky. It would be an Independence Day-sized craft that would literally cause massive panic and massive alarm. But again, when you consider that the cameras on the space shuttle here are seeing into the near ultraviolet spectrum of light, as we learned earlier, it's a spectrum of light that's too high in energy for us to see with our eyes. But because the camera can see into it, it can basically be capable of capturing an image that is so high in energy that although we can't see it with our eyes, it actually still is there. We just can't actually see it. Earlier I suggested how if a UFO were capable of doing light speed travel, a solid object initially, and it could change its frequency into high frequency energy, the UFO would still, or spaceship would still have actual structure to it. It would actually still have mass, but in its high frequency state it would turn into pure energy. Therefore, as it would appear on a camera, it would be very translucent. It would look like energy even though it has structure. And that's exactly what these objects look like. They look like almost transparent, translucent disks, which actually, as they pass behind some background stars, you can actually see starlight shining through them to suggest that they're in a pure wave or energy form. So, and again, this one, we can see the actual magnetic field rotating very, very quickly around the craft, suggesting that what we're looking at is pure energy, mass vibrating at a very high frequency. Across the top of the screen, we can see a very powerful pulsing coming off of one of the UFOs as it moves across the screen. Later, I would look very closely at the wave patterns on the UFO and study the wave patterns and find some incredible, incredible conclusions, incredible quantum physics and quantum energy equations. But we'll look at that much later. For now, we're left with the most astounding event ever captured on film. The largest UFOs ever captured on film, 2 to 3 miles in diameter, and quite conclusive. They're definitely going behind the tether. They can't be produced by some sort of an optical illusion. If this is the tether way in the background and the camera to the space shuttle is way up here, you can get a really bad reading against using the tether, the 12-mile length of the tether, as any sort of relative measuring rod. But I'm not doing that. We are confirming, and it's very obvious when you look at the tape, that the UFOs are going behind the tether. On February 28, 1996, United Press International published an article, Satellite Signals a Puzzle, mystifying the STS-75 tether incident. When the astronauts were actually able to regain contact with the tethered satellite, they found several unexplainable surprises. The article states, "There has been an event on the satellite that we do not understand yet," astronaut David Wolf told the Columbia crew. First, radio signals from the satellite caused engineers some surprise. The configuration of several systems had changed from when NASA lost contact with the craft on Sunday. For example, the spacecraft's nitrogen fuel tank was emptied and its steering thruster valves were opened. In addition, a gyroscope that had been left on was powered off, while 2 other gyroscopes remained on. All of these incidents require electronic, remote control commands from the astronauts on the shuttle. But if the astronauts did not make these commands, then who or what did? Could it have been the unidentified flying object that took over the controls of the satellite? So take a look at the tape again and see for yourself if some of the things I'm saying are not true. Dear Mr. Sarita, if the phenomena is interesting enough to deserve an investigation, then our preference would be for controlled experiments that closely duplicate the circumstances of the original observations and test our working hypotheses until they are either verified or falsified. A second line of investigation would be to obtain more evidence of the original sightings. For example, additional shuttle camera tapes. There are at least 4 mounted in the bay, to see if the same objects were seen on these. If these objects were large, then the same object would appear on 2 or more cameras, and these can be used to triangulate the distance from the shuttle to the object. If there are no objects that appear simultaneously on 2 or more cameras, then one must conclude that the objects seen in the near fields of the individual cameras and the dust bunny hypotheses get stronger. I would ask that you apply this line of reasoning and the test proposed in my last email and above to the evidence in hand to see which more consistently explains the observations. Signed, Dr. Joseph Newt. Dear Mr. Sarita, I received your package, but other duties have kept me from watching the tape you sent. I must admit that I am somewhat reluctant to begin another dialogue with you on this subject, as our last discussion nearly resulted in a formal Freedom of Information Act request on an area in which I have no formal responsibility, specialized NASA knowledge. I do not mind responding to inquiries from the public, since I feel that this is part of my job as a government employee. However, I really have little interest in getting into battles when my honest attempts to answer your questions do not seem to agree with what you want me to say. My personal home VCR has been broken for a while, and I have not yet had time to borrow one. When I do, I will let you know what I think that I see in the tape. Signed, Dr. Joseph Newt III. You're about to see what
you can buy that tape from your local video store. It comes in 2 complete episodes and occupies about 4 hours of similar but less dramatic scenes to that you've just seen. That is a pretty good indication of what the government knows about UFOs. And you see how the gentleman with whom the commentator on that program was in concert with him, and he couldn't answer him. He had to backpedal and say, we've got to triangulate, and this kind of thing drawn right out of mechanistic science, which has not provided any answers at all in the space situation. But you can buy that tape, and I suggest and recommend that you do, and look at it periodically and show it to friends that you have in your homes and let them see it. Because you know what the problem is with the UFO thing. If you try to talk about it with people that are not initiated, they say, oh, you know, that's all nonsense, just rubbish, so forth. But it isn't. It's anything but rubbish. The name of the tape is Evidence. NASA Evidence of UFOs. It's well worth whatever you have to give for it. Now, my involvement with UFOs goes back about 50 years. In fact, 52 years, in fact. And I was like most people are today, most of the, what I call the great unwashed, that I, said, oh, well, no, it's all bunkum, it's all rubbish, it's something that's come out of Hollywood or something like that. It's not a legitimate or an authentic thing. And I studied the books that were current at that time, in the early 1950s. Donald Kehoe's books were very current then. And I noticed one particular thing about the numerous sightings that he verified and explored in his presentation, and that was that numerous instances were cited of objects that simply disappeared while the pilots had them under observation. That now you have a UFO here and all of a sudden it disappears, it just dissolves, disappears. Similarly, and conversely, there are numerous accounts in those early books of sightings of objects that simply appear from out of nowhere and are reported by responsible and capable pilots. So here you have materialization and dematerialization. And nobody wanted to touch that. Nobody wanted to touch that. Nobody wanted any part of it. They said it was, just a misobservation. That was the normal way that those things were dealt with. But I concentrated my attention on these particular types of sightings, where objects appeared from out of nowhere and disappeared into nowhere. And I raised the question repeatedly, where have they gone? They have disappeared, they've gone. Was this just a figment of my imagination or of the observer's observation? Some of these guys that were observing these things were captains and majors and colonels in the Air Force and not disposed to misreport things on that scale. And other instances were occurring side by side with this, where pilots would be vectored onto a UFO on intercept, and they would be directed right to the UFO in the sky, and they would fly right through it and be seen to fly right through it on radar and would encounter nothing. So here was extensive evidence of things that were immaterial and yet became material. They were immaterial and they became material. So what did a young man do in the 1950s to deal with this? What could he do? What was the only thing open to him to find out where they had gone when they disappeared? You used infrared film. Now, infrared film responds to segments of the spectrum that your eye will not react to. In other words, this room could be flooded with the infrared light and you would not see anything. You can buy infrared film from any professional store. It costs like the devil now, but it wasn't too costly then, and we managed to get this infrared film together and begin our pursuit of these disappearing UFOs. And we started to go up to the desert every weekend without fail, because we were told by my teacher at that time, Dr. Franklin Thomas, a very, very learned man in things esoteric. He said, you go up there every weekend at the same time, go to the same place, and you will eventually, intersect with these things. Well, we went up week after week after week and didn't really get anything until August, the weekend of August the 25th, 1957, when I became aware of something above me. I could not see anything up above me, could not see anything directly, but I could see a pulsation in the sky above me, and I simply exposed my camera set on infinity to this, and more or less traced this object as it went over towards the east. And I got a set of classic pictures of a UFO in action, and it didn't look in the least bit like a flying ship. It was alive. And the more I probed into this, looking into ancient records of all kinds, the more I became convinced that there were two main aspects to this phenomenon of the UFOs. And they were unified or shared a common functioning principle that we didn't know anything about. We didn't know how you could make things dematerialize. This was done by people like Dr. Alexander Cannon in the UK, when he would make things dematerialize and then rematerialize somewhere else. That was done quite often before audiences of lawyers and so forth. But nobody actually had done any scientific work about this. So we set up a steady program of attacking this as a scientific venture. And we knew that we had already cut the cable with orthodox science, and there was no point in running to the local MSc or the local BS to get his opinion on things, because they just simply flipped out and wouldn't discuss it with you. I went into the Office of Naval Research under the auspices of a friend of mine who was very well connected in the Defense Department at that time. And I took in about 40 photographs that we had made of these things, and I fully expected that they would at least look at these pictures. And the guy kept looking at his watch all the time like this and saying, well, you know, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, so forth. And another guy came in with a video projector, not a video projector, a film projector, and we had a 50-foot length of film that showed these things quite spectacularly. And he projected against the pockmarked wall of this building where we were, and he wound it in and out of focus, and he said, now, when anybody asks, you can say that we've seen your films. That's the way the government treated us in those days. And what could we do about it except to say, you know, they're not right in what they're doing, but how are we going to change it? Not at all. The only thing that you can do is keep going along the line that you have already found to be fruitful. And that's what we did. And that's how we came to hear about a brilliant Austrian physician named Dr. Wilhelm Reich. And Dr. Reich was like us, except that he had a medical degree and a big laboratory in Maine. And Dr. Reich had run the very first scientific program looking at the human orgasm and seeking to find out what the function of the orgasm was. It seems incredible that you could go through at least 2,000 years in the post-Christian period with that particular situation still unknown to science. I'm not referring with the orgasm to the hurling out of the sexual substances or anything like that. That was, you know, more or less understood. Nobody wanted to deal with it anyway. But Reich said, now what is the function of the orgasm? And he pursued that line very, very diligently over a long period in his laboratory with professional help, one of whom became very close to me in the years that followed. And Dr. Reich found that there was connected with the orgasm a definite energy form that was new to science and that science did not understand. And he called this energy orgone energy. And you'll see it referred to increasingly as the years go by, because it's now coming into vogue and people can tolerate this much more readily than they could in the past. And so the thing about Dr. Reich's original work that fascinated me was that he had designed and developed a device for engineering rain using this energy. He found that this energy was present in the atmosphere and in the soil and in virtually everything. And he had designed a simple device for pointing up at the sky, 3 tubes in the pattern of 3/2, or 2/3, I should say. And with this device, he was able to access the energy in the atmosphere, and he was able to make it rain, and to develop the basic parameters of engineering rain this way. Well, I seized on this and started doing this, started taking it up. And that's a long, long time ago. I don't like to think about how long ago it is. And I did a lot of work with this and spent the rest of my life actually working with the orgone energy in an engineering rain, and was successful with it in a sense that I found out how it worked and how to do it. And I'm going to show you a half-hour film of it in action in the real world, so that you can't say that it's like the old story of the UFO is just something that somebody made a mistake about. It's a very, very authentic thing. And we now have a Singapore corporation organized to merchandise or market this throughout the world, but we have not yet been successful in getting a commercial contract to alleviate a drought in any part of the world. And we have found one very interesting thing about offering it for sale, is that when Mr. President or Mr. Vice President or the particular official you're dealing with sees the film, he becomes anxious. He becomes very anxious to see this thing work in this way. And he immediately says, well, can we have a demonstration? That's what we want to have, a demonstration. I said, look, it's right there on the screen. It's right there. We can show you how it works. We're going to do it. No results, no pay. What more do you want? If we give you a demonstration here where you have the problem of a drought, we might finish up having, 4 or 5 days of rain, and there's no drought for us to alleviate. And you shake our hands and stuff us on the first aeroplane that comes through, and that's that. So that's where we are with this. We have a system for manipulating the orgone energy in the atmosphere so that it will accumulate and control the atmosphere locally and regionally. And if our friend here with the camera can, we'll put it up. Yes, rain will result, and you are going to see this happen from zero dynamically.
Our 23-knot ship is heading east. The ship is east of Honolulu, Hawaii. A gorgeous tropical day. The magical power of time-lapse compresses the events of 3/4 of an hour into a few seconds. As we watch, our high-pressure, non-rain day is transformed before our eyes into a dismal day, and rain is imminent. We do this now with light aircraft, helicopters. The entire thing is new and revolutionary, but it is, after all, the same old rain. Hello. My name is Trevor James Constable. I'm the engineer that staged and carried out the rain engineering experiment that you just saw. Engineering rain off a clear horizon right over a speeding ship. That's something I've done literally hundreds of times. But always I dreamed of doing the same thing from an aircraft. Trouble was, the apparatus that we were using at sea was a little too big. Much, much too big to be hung on a light aircraft. When, through research and experiment, we got the size down and the power up, then, and only then, could we go airborne. Ladies and gentlemen, we are involved here in something that is intensely realistic. We utilize hardware, things like aircraft, things that are right down in the real physical world. There's nothing ghostly about any of this. Let's go now to the island of Oahu in Hawaii and involve ourselves directly in a real-world operation of a completely new kind, an airborne etheric rain engineering operation. Let's go. This is the Hawaiian Island Group in the Central Pacific. Our base is on the island of Oahu, illuminated for us here by our laser dot. And this is Oahu close up. For orientation purposes, there is Honolulu, the main city. And just to the northwest of there is the famous Pearl Harbor. And in the far northwest is Dillingham Field, our operations base. The main topographical feature of the island is the Ko'olau Range. This is a rocky spine running the whole length of the island. The Waianae Range runs over south of Dillingham Field, south and southeast. The operational plan is very simple. The airplane takes off from Dillingham Field and flies due east at 70 miles an hour for no more than 20 minutes. The aircraft then turns away and goes back to its base. That is the extent of the aircraft's involvement. All right. That's the operational procedure. Nothing too difficult about that. The question is, how is it that a single small airplane with a single small piece of hardware aboard can generate rain under such circumstances? How is it possible? The reason that this works is that the translator on the aircraft accesses not the air, the atmosphere, but the ether. It accesses the ether and it pushes it backwards. Now, since the ether is invisible and basically intangible, in order to get an idea of how this works, we are going to have to use some transparent plastic like this to simulate the ether in the sketch we're going to give you now, so that you'll understand how this is done, what the process actually does bring about in the real world. Here we go. There is the ether coming from east to west, right across Oahu and right around the Earth in tropical latitudes. Irresistible, invisible, eternal. The airplane enters the format at Dillingham Field with translators so designed that they interrupt and push backwards, locally, this flow of etheric force in the fashion depicted. The airplane leaves the format, and it leaves behind an accretion of etheric force right there, which draws to itself enormous masses of water vapor from the atmosphere. With the aircraft gone, this mass of water vapor, rain, moves over Oahu, and you have engineered rain on the island. To make things perfectly clear, the red chip designates the target zone in our operation, and offshore, that blue area there, that is where we should expect to see, perhaps, a satellite from thousands of miles up pick up a plume of moisture that we're going to generate with the aeroplane. Well, that's enough theorizing. Let's go right out now into the real world, but before we do, let's get a solid, objective weather forecast for the day from Honolulu TV. And they're going to tell us that picnic weather is going to prevail over Oahu. Here it is.
Lovely. Just wanted to show off. We have some clear skies for you this week. That's nice to see after looking at last week's forecast. Let's get a close look at this. Our surf is pretty much getting nothing. It's 2 to 4 in the north. That's your highest surf points. Also the east 2 to 4. But you look around, there's nothing to do. There's not even a high surf advisory. There's no gale warnings, nothing happening. And if you want to probably go snorkeling or just wind sailing, something mild, the picnic, that's where you go to the beach. And the weather's a good forecast for a picnic as well. As you see, a mostly sunny day. And our temperatures will be comfy in the mid-80s, southeasterly winds 5 to 15 miles per hour.
The plane is airborne at 1:15 p.m. The aircraft will make a single thrust due east for a period of 20 minutes. At 1:52, the plane is back from its mission, the pilot coming in for a debriefing. He reports rain around Waialua and over towards Haleiwa. It has pleased him. And at 2:16, beyond the runway over towards Haleiwa, we see it is indeed raining, and it is time to get a bird's eye view of what's going on. Now, the best way to get a bird's eye view of what's happening here is to act like a bird. Get aboard a sailplane. Up we go. Heading east. The tow plane in front of us. And there's nothing like getting a few hundred feet of altitude to see what's going on. There, to the magnetic east direction, is rain. This was induced by the thrust of the aircraft. As the tow plane curves us in a climbing turn, we get an opportunity to run a nice panoramic shot of central Oahu. As we continue our climbing turn, we are now heading to the west, and you can see the remains of that nice day underneath this blanket of rain-bearing cloud. With the tow plane gone, we're heading back now towards central Oahu, and we're looking at central Oahu over the top of the foothills of the Waianae Range, facing approximately southeast at the moment, and that is socked in. That area is being heavily rained. I would say at the rate of about an inch an hour, based on past experience. We're at 3,000 feet or thereabouts at the moment,
And we're starting to get rain up here. And the pilot has indicated that we will very soon have to terminate this. But our altitude gives us unequivocal evidence of rain engineered into central Oahu. No two ways about it. Now it's beginning to close in on us, and we're in it. Yeah, that's right. I won't charge you for the wash, Bill.
Remember today's television weather forecast? Picnic weather. Well, rain came down at the rate of 1 inch an hour for about 2.5 hours in central Oahu this afternoon and led to a small stream and flash flood advisory. So they did indeed have picnic weather in central Oahu, but it was a different kind of a picnic.
Has been very, very wet this afternoon. In fact, the National Weather Service has issued a urban and small stream flood advisory. That's for the areas from about Wahiawa up to Haleiwa. Heavy showers have been coming down here. It's convective activity. Things are a little unstable out there. So when things heated up, that set off a series of fairly good showers out here, mainly in the Po'omoho and Haleiwa area, and the urban and small stream is in effect until 8 o'clock tonight. Could be some ponding in roads out there, make driving a bit treacherous, so be careful if you're heading out to that direction.
And small stream flood advisory is now in effect for central Oahu from Wahiawa all the way up to Haleiwa. There we go. And here's the shower area right here under that flood advisory. It is in effect until 8 o'clock tonight. It looks like most of that moisture will end after sunset. All the shower activity coming from a separate area of moisture. Not right now. I'll show you here on our satellite loop, which represents 12 hours. You can see the little plumes develop there. Here's the moisture that's affecting Haleiwa area being hardest hit the past few hours. It's been raining so hard that the smaller streams are at the point of almost overflowing. But once again, you can see the little plumes develop.
Now she is showing you our little plume that we created with the aeroplane. She'll put her finger right on it.
Develop there. Here's the moisture that's affecting Haleiwa area being hardest hit the past few hours.
Now she's got her finger right on it, and it is directly to the east of Oahu. In other words, it's right in the zone that we disturb in accordance with the diagrams that I showed you earlier on. That's just about as elegant a demonstration of how it works as one could possibly wish for.
Well, that's how it's done. In Hawaii, on the fringe of the tropics, where all this was pioneered. Now, deep in Equatoria, down in Malaysia, the Philippines, and places like that, these processes work with much greater effectiveness and power. In October of 1997, we ran an interesting little operation out of Segamat in the center of Malaysia. Let's take a look at that.
Takeoff from the Segamat Country Club is at 2:31 p.m. Our mission is a single 15-minute flight directly to the east right off the runway, to be followed by a second such operation, provided the weather does not become violent. The weather's response to our thrust is sharp and nasty, putting the follow-up flight in jeopardy. Our number 2 flight was indeed curtailed, limited to 9 minutes by imminent, very heavy weather. With the plane back now at 4:43, we'll have an interview with Captain Bala Ratnam, our pilot, and he'll tell us
professionally exactly what he's just seen.
We have a large build-up over there.
Yeah.
Over there, and there's one more which is coming down from the south, which is right now building about 15 miles away. And she's coming in fast because we are having prevailing winds coming in from this direction.
Yeah.
So she will be along here quite soon, and the build-up over here will be here approximately in about 8 minutes' time. So we can see both masses joining together and giving us a heavy downpour.
Good. Thank you, Bella.
No problem, sir. Anytime. Anytime.
10 o'clock on the night of the 14th of October. We're looking out now from the hotel, from the 7th floor of the Villa Hotel in Sagamat. And this entire area is now being enveloped in rain, thunder and lightning. This is the consequence of the operation today. And we'll go down to street level and let you see this happening. Outside McDonald's, the main drag, it's a wet night. Courtesy of the men from Singapore. Welcome rain soaked into an area that had been dry for months and was very welcome. The rain persisted through until 2 the next morning and laid down between 2 and 2.5 inches over the entire region. Our pilot in Malaysia is a Singaporean named Captain Bala Ratnam. He is of Indian descent, and he was trained as a pilot in the United States. When we first attached this hollow tube, this empty tube with no electrical connections and no chemicals, to the wing strut of his Skyhawk, I saw him smirking a little. After he had flown 10 or 12 of these weather engineering missions, and had made his share of the world's rain, he had different ideas. I was able to capture some of his comments on videotape. Here is Captain Bala Ratnam. Like a normal person, you no doubt had your skepticism about the whole thing. Is that correct?
Very true. Never thought it would work. Never did. And because basically there was what I know about cloud seeding and causing rain. Basically use some kind of chemicals, smoke, something to make the cloud more dense so that it will basically rain. And having 2 tubes in my airplane wasn't much of a, how should I say, it wasn't really acceptable. It doesn't seem workable, how to put it that manner.
I see. And what's your view now after several weeks doing this?
Dangerous thing. Never had the tubes on your wings. The results have fascinated me to a very great extent. Never did I expect flying on clear days to have experienced such turbulent weather within such a short period of time and it appearing without any notice whatsoever.
Yeah, I see. Now, you have an FAA license. You were trained in the States, right?
Yes, I was, and I hold a commercial multi-engine instrument making license with an instructor on single engine and also on instrument making.
I see.
And my license number is 2466946.
Okay. What is the thing that has occurred in these flights that has impressed you most with this new method of weather engineering?
Okay, number one, simplicity. There's nothing to be thrown out, nothing to be dispersed in the air, and it's very efficient. It's very efficient.
And you're convinced of the effects?
Yes, I am.
That comes from first hand.
Having to dodge weathers, having lightning strikes appear all of a sudden, left and right of you. Yes, it's first hand.
Kuala Lumpur is the capital of Malaysia. And the Kuala Lumpur city and region was in a severe 4.5 months drought when I was called as a consultant down there in April of 1998. The first thing I did was load some of our weather guns into a sky van, a twin turboprop transport. A big, strong aircraft, and it will carry anything we want to put in it. Made in the UK, essentially it's a flying truck. "28 hours after I set foot in Malaysia, this was the scenario at Subang International Airport in Kuala Lumpur. In the week that followed that spectacular drought-breaking job, helicopters were put into service in this type of work for the very first time. Their use was pioneered in Malaysia in 1998. They proved themselves to be the most effective vehicle yet for engineering rain in the tropics. Attaching the P-guns to the helicopter skids proved to be no problem at all. A solid, secure mount was very easy to make. Getting it approved by the bureaucracy was tough, but we made it. Helicopters take you easily into places that you probably shouldn't go. Here we're up above the Semenyih Dam in a squall. Downdrafts, updrafts, violent weather. Not a good place to be. We put a lot of water in this place, but it didn't seem to show on the dipstick. More a job for Errol Flynn. Heavy ponding in the heights of the Semenyih Dam. Heading westward, at the conclusion of operations each evening, we would find that we were causing a west to east flow of ether to compress and swing to the south so that it arrived on our port side. You're looking at that now, and this engineered rain walks along with the helicopter, completely in phase with it, drenching the terrain below as we move. In this case, you're looking at about 12 to 14 square miles that is under rain as a result of the passage of the helicopter, just like crop dusting with water. Kuala Lumpur under rain. And as we come in for a landing at Subang International Airport, this whole area is still under rain and it's pretty well drenched. Getting back to the hotel was kind of wild. And back at the Renaissance Hotel, they are enjoying the first decent rains in 4 months.
I call engineering. And by night, the story was just about the same. And here is the world-famous KL Tower, wreathed in rain and clouds. That's the way it was in Malaysia.
This is a brief overview of the stunning potential of airborne etheric rain engineering in Equatoria. These are techniques and a technology that is available right now. It does not matter, ladies and gentlemen, what academic people say about the ether. I prefer the driving beat of rain on the canopy of my aircraft, because in the final analysis, only results count. Only results count. Goodbye.
Well, now you know where my life has gone. into the creation of that type of rain engineering procedure that is valid and it works, and it is putting an awful scare into the people who are trying to create a world drought where they can raise the prices on the poor devils that just need a drink of water, put them up right through the roof, and if they die, well, then, the oligarchy doesn't give a damn. But we're not going to sit still and see that happen. That's the story. Thank you for your attention and for having me here. Very much obliged.
Hello? Man? Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Constable. It's an incredible presentation. I'm just actually blown away. First question, is it all right if you take some questions,
sure,
sir?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. First question, the UFOs in space, where do you think this is all leading to? And do you believe that what you call it, planet, will we be leaving this planet to go live other places? Do you believe?
No. No. What I think about the UFO problem is, would involve quite a lengthy lecture in itself. The thing is that the objects are there. There is no question about that. You've seen it now on government film. The astronauts shot it for you. And it's only you that prevents you from disseminating this further amongst the citizenry. Then you may get some answers out of the government if more people raise intelligent questions. So I don't think that we are very far now from having a general disclosure of the UFO problem. And it will mean an alignment, a realignment of all the relations of Earth life, in my opinion. But it can't come until certain things are straightened out, one of them being the present economic crisis, which is man-made, and you know, it's going to lead to a new dark age, which the certain beings in the ships would like not to see happen. But there are other entities in the ships that do want to see it happen. It's not just, you know, people from other planets or anything like that. Nothing that simple.
Some of the ones that you say that, I know there are some that don't want this to happen, to go into the Dark Ages, but there are some that are few. Are you talking about the Dracos?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. It's just that, think of it this way. We have on this earth probably 50 or 60 different races of man. Why do we think that out there are any less? And that they're going to be like we are here, you know, having different viewpoints and different morals and everything else. We shouldn't expect them all to be there, you know, to bail us out or to hold us up. There's some there that have damaged our aircraft and shot them down, and I've dealt with those in my book. That's to inform people that the UFOs are not a universal helpful manifestation, not at all.
Okay. I'd just like to add that I did hear Robert Dean speak in this room, and he did say there was about 100 different entities, so I agree with what you're saying, that there were many.
Yeah, that's right.
My second question is, if that's okay, it's pretty amazing how you create the rain, but is that to prevent stuff like HARP from controlling the weather on the planet?
That's right.
Mr. Constable?
That's right. See, you don't need to fence off 3,000 or 4,000 acres and put up big antennas and things like that to do this. You do this. I just went down to Hawaii 2 months ago and did it, made rain in Honolulu 4 times with a device 18 inches long and 1.5 inches in diameter. No chemicals and no electric power, not even a battery. That's how you do it. And, you know, what they're doing is wasting money up there with that HARP thing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Constable.
You're welcome.
Well, I assume you have a wider purpose with this. With this
wider purpose than taking care of the world's water needs? There isn't a much wider purpose than that.
Of course.
But it's getting to do it against the oligarchic structure of the world, which is very much in favor of drought.
Which then follows that you must have some plans for putting this into the hands of the people in such a way that it will proliferate all over.
Well, we would like to do that. We would like to think that the people were available to do it, but we find that the oligarchy has long hands, long fingers, and is into everything and controls everything. And it's made it very difficult to get anything done.
So how hard is it to distribute the plans and have individuals take up on the plans and make them themselves?
It's not that type of a thing at all. It took me 25 years to get this into this shape.
Correct.
See,
but then
I had to completely reorganize my whole life to do this.
Well, I know that Mr. Edison spent many years with his helpers to create the light bulb, but once he created it, it wasn't difficult to distribute it.
That's right.
So
That's
I
right.
was thinking the same thing, that it may have taken you many years of investment.
That's right.
To do this, but then now that you've worked out all the kinks, perhaps others could take up on it and serve humanity.
Well, you have another aspect to it other than just passing it on to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. That is not, going to go down at all well. You have to have some type of control of it. This is something that I have been very, very careful about, is who I convey the information concerning this type of weather engineering to.
They could use those services in Africa and Ethiopia back in the 1980s when they created that terrible drought that led to the death of a million Ethiopians.
Yes, right.
Exactly, but when I look at Tabasco, the state of Tabasco in Mexico, where they had all these tremendous torrential rains recently. Whole states are being flooded.
Yes.
And tremendous amount of people are being displaced.
Right.
They're going into the cities. A lot of them can make it. Of course, they're coming here as illegal aliens.
Yeah.
So I'm beginning to believe somebody's manipulating the weather, creating all these torrential rains. And as far as I can remember, Nikola Tesla found a way to manipulate the weather way back then.
That is correct.
And J.P. Morgan was his financier.
Yeah.
So we can see that the methodology for disrupting the weather can be used as a weapon. And of course, J.P. Morgan got a hold of it, and we can see it being used as a weapon now.
Well,
If that had happened in Katrina?
Well, J.P. Morgan cut off Tesla's funding because he couldn't see, how he could get across the distribution of the power. That's what happened to Tesla, was that his funding was destroyed. He didn't stop inventing things, but he was stopped from promoting them and giving them to the world.
Right. What I'm getting at is that you found a way to create droughts, but these people are now using the same methodology that you have found to create torrential rainpours all over the place. Look at Hurricane Mitch.
Yeah, I don't believe
America,
that. I don't believe that. I don't believe it.
Well, look,
no.
Hurricane Mitch in Central America inundated Honduras and all kinds of areas, and guess what? Within a week, the IMF was already in there imposing plans to privatize that whole area.
Yes.
That's very coincidental that within a week, the International Monetary Fund, which is controlled by the international financial elite, is already in their privatization of all those areas that were flooded.
Yes.
Somebody's using it as a weapon. Right?
Yeah, well, it could be that they would have some machinery or a device that they've developed, but if they were like me, they wouldn't be doing that.
Yes, I was wondering that you had chosen tropical areas to operate in on this. Is there any effectiveness of this methodology in arid areas?
Yeah, there is, but it's very difficult to get it without substantial funding and patience on the part of the people that want it done. That they don't have. They want you to go out and have the airplane fly over and the rain comes down. And, if you don't do it that way, why, then they're not interested.
Impatient.
But, yeah, that's right. But it is just something that needs some funding so that you can look into how to do it. See, it can be done. I've no doubt of that. But right now we can't do it unless there's at least 13 grams of water per cubic meter of rain of atmosphere.
Oh, thank you.
With 13 grams, and we can make it rain anywhere. Oh. That's not very very humid, but you have to have that much at the present level of the technology.
I see.
Yeah.
Also, I'm happy to see that you have your book here, which I know has long been unavailable.
Yeah, that's right.
I hope everyone here takes advantage of this rare occasion and picks up a copy of Mr. Constable's book.
Well, thank you for that. But my late great friend and associate, Mr. Owen Trent, said that that book was really like a manual for the age we're going into, that you need that information in order to navigate safely through the hazards of the present time.
Hello. What are the main differences between your etheric rain engineering and the original cloud busting of Wilhelm Reich?
Well, there's really, mine is a further development of the cloud busting procedures. I started as an operator of cloud busters, and I went on to develop the no chemicals, no electric power, just using geometry and velocity.
What do you think of the cloud busting of Jim DeMeo?
What do I think of it?
Yes.
Well, he's been very successful. He was successful in Africa. He made a couple of very substantial lakes over there a couple of years ago. I don't know what he's been doing lately, but yeah, he's been effective. Yeah.
And what have you done to ensure the preserving of your innovations after you're gone?
Who carries it on?
Yes.
I don't care. I can't be worried about that.
Right, thank you.
I'm just worried about getting it done now.
That was sort of the question I was going to ask. Does anybody else know how to build these things besides you?
Well, there's nothing to building them. There's nothing to that. It's using them. It's, you know.
But does anybody know how to do the nothing?
Yes, there's other people. Yeah.
And the other thing is, in say a 2-week period, how many, wherever you decide to set up, how many failures would you have? Do you succeed every time if you're given 2 weeks or not?
Well, you'd have a target. And maybe you wouldn't set it as quite as fine as 2 weeks, for example, if you were trying to deal with drought in Los Angeles, because this is a very dry area. It's basically a desert. But you would just, you know, certain places, like in the desert, you wouldn't accept a contract to make it rain for that reason.
I understand that, but how about when you're working along the equator in the tropics?
Oh, yeah, well, you could guarantee it there. It would be no results, no pay. Yeah.
Oh, and how far east or north and south of the equator can you usually work?
Well, up to about 30 degrees north. It's fairly common to find 13 grams of moisture. But that's just strictly a temporary blockage that we'll overcome eventually, is, you know, that you need 13 grams. We know we can make it rain when we have 13 grams, but we'd like to be able to do it when you have 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, Reich, he put the tubes in the Mojave Desert and grew, I think there was, like you said, 2/3.
Yeah.
He grew wheat that was 6 feet tall.
Uh-huh.
He just had these mounted up toward the...
Yes.
So it did work in the desert.
Sure.
But how long did that take, do you know? Or
No. No, I don't know. But that's...
They seem larger than the ones you had on the plane, though.
Yeah, well, that's right.
They seem like about 8-10 inch diameter.
That's right. They can be that big, and that is a, you know, a good thing to have a big bore tube. We have some now out there in Desert Hot Springs.
Is there a ratio between the width and the length of the tube?
Yes, there is.
What is that ratio?
Well, I don't want to tell you that.
What other uses are there for this Oregon energy? Like, I'm thinking, could you replace home-sized wind turbines or solar collectors to produce...
Well, you know, it's trying to get money to look into the possibilities, which are enormous, of Oregon energy. It's literally like pulling teeth. It's literally like pulling teeth. And the main reason for that is the description I gave you of Dr. Reich's greatest scientific experiments, which were to find out what the function of the orgasm was. And I have myself seen it with businessmen, that when you start talking about the organ energy and so forth, that they become anxious. And that ends the transaction right there. They become anxious. It goes right into the genitality of the human being, is organ energy.
So now when a businessman becomes anxious, what does that mean?
It means that he tightens up. He tightens up. He becomes anxious.
Is that because he can't figure out a way to make profit on it?
No, it's got nothing to do with that. It's coming from right inside him. Yeah. That's what makes it difficult. It really does.
Feels okay to me.
Yeah, I know. You're okay. If you have a couple of $1 million, why? You see, when you're going to develop something like this for a specific purpose, you have to set it up like a regular project, and that means that, you know, you've got to supply the eats for a lot of people, and take care of overhead, normal business overhead, and the average businessman will not tackle this, not so far.
Thanks for coming out. Say, you detected beams in the infrared. Have you ever looked in the ultraviolet?
Oh yeah, those were ultraviolet films that you saw
those
today.
Were ultraviolet.
Yeah.
Okay. And is the infrared actually picking up the heat from them, or are the beams themselves actually infrared?
Well, the infrared is a harmonic of the ultraviolet. Okay. So there's no means of telling which angle of it you're dealing with. But the thing is that the Air Force got on to building that camera about 15 years after I showed that these things were there. And I'm sorry that I don't have the pictures here to show you tonight, but I followed up on my organization of my trip here. But you'd have been able to see them yourself.
That was a nice presentation.
No, welcome.
Thank you.
Sir, I have a two-part question. First of all, I saw you about 25 years ago at the end. That dates me a bit. I was very young then. I was just a youngster. But I saw you at the Anderson Research Foundation.
Oh, yes,
And the late Dr. Lawrence Anderson, the
yes.
very fine man who has gone on, sponsored you. Dr. Anderson had a couple of orgone accumulators.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, have those devices been used with much effectiveness, and how widespread are they?
Oh, yes. The orgone energy accumulator is a very effective device, which is why the government watches it very closely. But it is very effective in wounds and dealing with wounds and burns, things like that. It's an invaluable contribution to human health. It really should be more widely used. And certainly it should be taught in the universities. That's where our educational system is all wet, is that it completely ignores these things. And they have to fight their way into the world.
And then the other question was, I'd heard that rather advanced weather experiments were being funded by some mysterious source in Peru. And I'm wondering if you knew anything about that.
No, I don't. I've heard that too, that somebody down there has funded them, but I don't know what method they're using.
And you don't know who's funding them and what they've done?
No, nothing. I don't know anything about that.
You just heard the rumors that I've heard.
That's right, same rumors.
Okay, thanks.
I should mention that in the course of my life, the most important thing that happened to me was that I went back to sea during the Vietnam War in the Merchant Marine. I had been in the British Merchant Marine prior to this, and I spent 26 years in the United States Merchant Marine as a radio officer, a radio electronics officer, and I spent 14 years on the Hawaiian run, which was the time when I put all this together and was able to check everything out and to find out what worked and what didn't. That was a very, very wonderful break in my life, was to be appointed to that ship at that time. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in videography, and I know that there are a lot of infrared cameras around, but I don't know if those infrared cameras would be sufficient for videotaping the entities and beings that you're talking about. Would you know, are there any infrared cameras which would be effective?
There are, but I don't think they're on the regular market. But you would be able to get an ordinary camera and infrared film and do it that way. But you probably do better with film than with any other method. That's been my experience, is that I'm more successful with film than with anything else.
What about thermographic machinery?
Well, those machines require a higher, stronger pulse of energy than you would need to get these entities or anything like that. Is that what you want to photograph?
Of course. I've been trying to get one of those filters you've been talking about,
oh, yeah,
for years.
No, they're gone right out. You can't get them now. You'd have to order 6 of them from Germany.
I'll order 6 if
yeah.
you can find out where to get them.
Yeah.
The other question I had was, it seems to me that the HAARP disturbance of the weather causes standing waves, where there'd be an excessive drought in low pressure in one area and excessive high pressure in the other area. And you can sort of see this. And it's my impression that this is a very damaging phenomenon to the entire stratosphere, and that your technology is more friendly to the biosphere. Would you support that intention?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's friendly, especially if you know how to use it. And if you don't know how to use it, you can do a lot of damage with it, because the energy, the orgone energy, goes in and out of the Earth. The Earth breathes orgone energy. That is you know, the secret of many of the mysteries of meteorology is in the fact that the Earth breathes, and it breathes this energy. And, you know, a great deal of valuable work could be done if that were recognized and made the subject of scientific projects. But the average scientist in the university programs and so forth, he really doesn't want to have anything coming in from left field. He just don't want that.
Your reasons for retaining your technology for the protection of it, I would presume.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
because it could be misused seriously in the wrong
Absolutely.
hands.
That's something, that's the reason I haven't communicated it to people other than those that I trust and that, you know, who prove themselves. A small group out at Desert Hot Springs that has, you know, stood the test. But that's about all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What are your thoughts on the chemtrail phenomena?
On the what?
On the chemtrails phenomena?
Oh, that's a government program, and
As it relates to like weather modification and stuff like that?
well, it does. It produces a certain amount of weather modification, and then a lot of people turn cloudbusters on the chemtrails to dissipate them, and they do dissipate them. Yeah, and that you know, gets the government upset, but I don't have anything to do with the chemtrail business at all.
Is there any rumor to the critters being attracted to the chemtrails or curious?
Well, they may be. I don't know, you know, all life habits of the critters, but you know, they may be connected with them. They may, you know, be attracted to them. Maybe.
Do you have any photographs, or is there anything like
I haven't taken them, but some people have. The thing is that when Bob McCullough, who was Wilhelm Reich's biological assistant, when he was alive, he took quite a few pictures when he was flying from the East Coast back to where he was working in Utah. And he was up at about 29,000 feet, and he took a whole string of pictures of these critters out the port. He couldn't see them, of course, but they registered on the infrared film, and they're just teeming up there. They're all over the place. But, you know, you have got to remove your optical limitation if you want to see them, and that's where infrared comes in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What kind of instrumentation do you use to measure orgone energy? How do you identify it?
Well, we don't use anything except our own sensitivity, and this is you know, a big departure that is heavily criticized by the Orthodox people. We use a personal sensitivity.
Well, I assume that if you can push the ether one way to create the rain, can you push it the other way when a storm is threatening and you don't want too much water?
Well, there's none of that business of pushing them this way and that way with the ether. You don't do that.
Well, I was looking at your cellophane example.
Yeah, you get with where a flow is going in a certain way, which it does for many months at a time, and you block it in order to build up the potential. And when the potential of the ether builds up, the atmospheric water vapor runs to where it's building up. That's how you do it. Mm-hmm.
I was acquainted with a gentleman who had done a lot of work on ether. And he used Sir James Jean's work as part of his information. And he came up with a triarcuate design. And I noticed in your film something very similar to what he was doing in order to get that apparently some sort of lift or propulsion on the device electrostatically. But he claimed that there was an ether out there, and and by putting in electrostatic force between two objects, one positive and the other negative, you could actually get a traction on that ether.
These are all things that should be done big time. They should be done by the universities, not by, you know, lone individuals that are doing it out of their pocket money or that sort of thing. This is something that is called for in the world.
His name was Commander Townsend T. Brown. I don't know if you know
Townsend
that.
Brown, yeah, sure.
Yeah, he's
Sure,
a friend of mine.
he was on the right track, no doubt about it.
Trevor, on our website it said that you would also speak on smog reduction. Is that a byproduct of creating the rain, or is it kinda
yes,
like
it is.
clear the air?
And we were very successful here in Los Angeles for 3 years, 1987, 1988, and 1990. And in 1990 was the most successful weather engineering operation we'd ever run anywhere in the world. And if you look in the records of the pollution, it's way down in that particular year. And it could be brought down permanently for peanut money. For peanuts. I mean, we put 14 little orgone generators all around the basin here in 1990, and they just cleaned the whole place up. It was a marvelous thing. But they weren't interested. We couldn't get to see them, any of them. Just. Yeah.
Mr. Constable, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Unbelievable. I think we should give a warm round of applause one more time for Mr. Trevor J. Constable. Ladies and gentlemen, phenomenal.